Hello and welcome to another episode. I am Brian, the Unskilled Commander, and this is Deck Break It Down. Today we're looking at Azusa Lost But Seeking, my relatively new Big Stompy Green deck. So a deck like this is pretty easy to make and not very complicated because it literally is just about extreme mana ramp and giant creatures, ideally with trample. But let's go ahead and get you the breakdown. So for lands, we got 37. Most of them are basic forests. However, I do have my staples of Reliquary Tower because there is some card draw in here. Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, and Mirrored Landscape. I still stand by the fact that even in a monocolor deck, those are really good to help deck thin, because while you have to sacrifice them to go get a basic forest, and that will come in tapped, you're like, oh, you're wasting a turn, but at the same time, now you're getting 2 cards out of your deck instead of just 1. And it can help get you closer to the bigger creatures or the big spells that you need. I like it. I have no backup statistics for it. I just think it works, and I seem to see that it helps my decks. Next up, we've got artifacts. The pretty much staples for the artifacts, we've got your normal Soul Ring, Bonder's Ornament, Thran Dynamo, everything that can make a lot of mana within the things themselves. Cage Sun, Gilded Lotus. There's 8 artifacts total, but 2 of them are special because one is Staff of Titania and the other is Bow of Nylea. Bow, of course, giving all of your creatures Death Touch, which is a nice bonus on top of the ideally trample they may have, but Staff of Titania gives them +X/+X, whereas the number of forests you control. And whenever it attacks, you make a 1/1 green forest dryad. So it helps make a little tiny 1/1 blocker every time you attack, which does count as a forest land creature, so it buffs that whatever gets this attachment even more. But having, swinging out with a bunch of big creatures and then having a bunch of little weenies to block with is a pretty solid strategy as well. Next up, we've got sorceries. There are 15 of them in the deck. Again, these are pretty much standard. We've got all of the, well, not all by any stretch, but it's a big focus on mana ramp spells. Explosive Vegetation, Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Circus Route, all the stuff you'd expect. And the majority of the sorceries are ramp spells. So you got with the sorceries and the ramp out of all the mana rocks, ideally you're going to be dumping a ton of land and mana within the first 3-4 turns. Also within the sorceries are a couple bigger spells. One that helps draw you cards, Soul's Majesty, and then Rishkar's Expertise, also helping you draw cards off of these giant creatures, and Howl of the Night Pack, a personal favorite of mine from my 60-card decks. Put a 2/2 green wolf creature token on the battlefield for each forest you control. You ramp real hard, maybe they board wipe away your big creatures. Okay, fine, I'm going to play this. Now I have 17 2/2 wolves for next turn. What are you going to do about those? And of course the answer is another board wipe. But still, I really appreciate and love that card. I think it's great. It's a 7 mana drop, but in this kind of deck, that should still be like turn 5. It shouldn't even be a big deal. Faster than that even. Next up, we've got 7 instances of instance. These, again, are all really straightforward. These are your answers. We've got, Sundering Vital, Return to Nature, Return to Earth, Heroic Intervention to give everything indestructible, and then spells that make your creatures deal damage based on their power to your opponent's creatures without fighting, just they deal damage. And again, if you're playing a bunch of really big spells or big creatures, it should hopefully be able to, you play that, you kill one of their creatures before you even go to combat. Next up, we've got enchantments. There are 11 of them. For the enchantments, it focuses a fair amount on card draw, Greater Good, Garruk's Uprising, Guardian Project, pretty standard stuff. The fun ones within the enchantments, however, are Unnatural Growth. At the beginning of combat, on each combat, you double the power and toughness of your creatures until end of turn. So that means whether you're attacking or whether it's their turn and they're attacking you, your creatures are doubled. Plus a couple buff spells like Gaia's Anthem, Sylvan Anthem, and a staple, Beastmaster's Ascension. Now, with the big giant creatures, you're only going to have a couple, maybe one per turn, even with all the ramping. So Beastmaster's Ascension isn't going to kick in too quickly. However, there are some creatures to try and help with that. So moving to the creatures, we've got 21 of them. The bulk of them, of course, are going to be your big dogs. Now, there's no Eldrazi in this deck because it's a little obvious, and that's the basic one that everyone goes to. Big green with Eldrazi, so that everyone has to, with Annihilator, you have to make them destroy permanents and blah blah. I chose just actual big creatures that ideally have trample or a couple that give trample. But you've got, Kaloan Twingrove, Titan, Tenth Rex, Palaka Worm, which is great because it gives you life when it comes in, Goreclaw, Terror of Qual Sisma, because that makes your spells cheaper and they come in with counters. A couple that help do things like Cleanup Crew and Nylene have gone to the hunt. And then Carnage Tyrant, Kodama of the East Tree, which helps get you more creatures out faster, stuff like that. Within the creatures, the fun little surprises, if they're even surprises, are things like Living Hive, Ant Queen, and Arasta of the Endless Web. Each one can help make a ton of insects, or just 1/1 blockers of some kind. Arasta, whenever your opponents cast instants and sorceries, you're getting a 1/2 insect. Ant Queen is great because once it's only a 5/5, but once it's on the field, if you do have like 10 mana, you can dump it all and make 5 1/1 green insect creature tokens. If you don't have anything else to play, you still have options to make a bunch of blockers. Or, and then if you've got the buff spells like Beastmaster's Ascension or, Unnatural Growth or Sylvan Anthem, now they're going to be 2/2s or more than that. And with all these little 1/1 blockers, that's where you can really get Beastmaster's Ascension kicking in faster. Swing with all the 1/1s, even if they're not going to get through, and one of your big creatures that has trample, Beastmasters kicks in. Now it's an extra 5/5 on your big trample creature, and you've got a bunch of 6/6s on the ground as well. Now there's not much in flying, there's hardly any reach as well, so there's plenty of weaknesses, but at the same time, it's absolutely what it's supposed to be. It's big, stompy, dumb creatures as fast as possible. I really enjoy this deck. It's relatively new, as I've said, and it obviously will be tweaked as I go along. Maybe better mana rocks, better creatures that have trample, and with better mana values or whatever to get them out slightly quicker or whatever. But all in all, it functions pretty solid. It's a lot of fun to play, and I like it. Thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Maybe do some likes along the way, and I will see you next time.